Question 1. Market research demonstrates that financial institutions are increasingly targeted by sophisticated cyber attacks. As a technical test analyst working for a UK-based fintech company that processes sensitive customer financial data, you are tasked with planning and executing security tests for a new payment processing module. Given the stringent regulatory environment governed by the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional responsibility? Option A. Develop a comprehensive security test plan that identifies relevant FCA and PCI DSS compliance objectives, selects appropriate security testing techniques, including static analysis, dynamic analysis, and targeted penetration testing, to validate these objectives, and analyzes results to assess their impact on regulatory compliance and business risk, reporting findings with clear recommendations for remediation. Option B. Conduct automated vulnerability scans and basic penetration tests before deployment, focusing on identifying common technical flaws, and report findings without explicitly linking them to specific FCA or PCI DSS requirements. Option C. Focus exclusively on identifying the maximum number of technical vulnerabilities, regardless of their potential impact on regulatory compliance or the business, and report all findings without prioritization. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment of the payment module by performing only minimal, high-level security checks, deferring comprehensive security testing to a post-release audit. Correct answer is B. Conduct automated vulnerability scans and basic penetration tests before deployment, focusing on identifying common technical flaws, and report findings without explicitly linking them to specific FCA or PCI DSS requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid product deployment and the imperative of robust security, especially within a regulated financial services environment. The technical test analyst must balance the need to identify and mitigate security vulnerabilities with the business pressure to release features quickly. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security testing is not merely a perfunctory step, but an integral part of the development lifecycle, adhering to established standards and regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated security test planning process that aligns with relevant financial regulations and industry best practices. This includes identifying applicable security standards, e.g., those mandated by the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, in the UK, or relevant Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, requirements if card data is handled, defining security test objectives that address these standards, and selecting appropriate security testing techniques, e.g., vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, secure code review to validate compliance. The analysis of results must then focus on the severity and exploitability of identified vulnerabilities in the context of regulatory requirements, leading to clear, actionable reports that prioritize remediation efforts based on risk and compliance impact. This approach ensures that security is built into the product from the outset, minimizing the risk of breaches and regulatory noncompliance, which can lead to significant financial penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by conducting only superficial vulnerability scans without considering the specific regulatory landscape or the application's context fails to meet the professional obligation. This oversight can lead to the release of products with critical security flaws that violate regulatory mandates, exposing the organization to severe penalties and customer harm. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying comprehensive security testing until after the product has been deployed, is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This reactive stance significantly increases the risk of a security incident occurring before vulnerabilities are identified and addressed, directly contravening the principles of due diligence and responsible product management expected within regulated industries. A further incorrect approach, which focuses solely on identifying technical vulnerabilities without assessing their impact on regulatory compliance or business risk, demonstrates a lack of strategic understanding. While technical accuracy is important, the ultimate goal of security testing in a regulated environment is to ensure the protection of sensitive data and the integrity of financial operations in accordance with legal and regulatory frameworks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the regulatory context. Identify all applicable laws, regulations, and industry standards relevant to the product and its operating environment. 2. Risk-based planning. Prioritize security testing efforts based on the potential impact of vulnerabilities on regulatory compliance, business operations, and customer data. 3. Integration with development. Embed security testing activities throughout the software development lifecycle, rather than treating them as an afterthought. 4. Clear reporting and communication. Ensure that security test results are communicated effectively to stakeholders, highlighting risks and recommending appropriate remediation actions, with a clear link to compliance requirements. 5. Continuous improvement. Regularly review and update security testing strategies and processes based on emerging threats, regulatory changes, and lessons learned. Question 2. Analysis of a situation where a technical test team consistently faces delays in delivering test results due to a high volume of late-stage defect discoveries. The team lead is considering two primary approaches to address this. A. Dedicating all available resources to retesting and regression testing of newly found defects to ensure a stable release. Or B. Initiating a formal process improvement initiative, leveraging test metrics to identify root causes of late defect discovery and implementing preventative measures. Which approach is most aligned with the principles of professional test process improvement and risk management? Option A. Dedicating all available resources to retesting and regression testing of newly found defects to ensure a stable release. Option B. Initiating a formal process improvement initiative, leveraging test metrics to identify root causes of late defect discovery and implementing preventative measures. Option C. Implementing a new, more complex test automation framework without first analyzing current process inefficiencies. Option D. Focusing solely on increasing the number of test cases executed per day, irrespective of defect discovery trends. The correct answer is B. Initiating a formal process improvement initiative, leveraging test metrics to identify root causes of late defect discovery and implementing preventative measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in technical testing, balancing the need for immediate defect resolution with the long-term goal of improving the testing process. The pressure to deliver a stable product quickly can lead to a reactive approach, neglecting the systematic identification and implementation of process improvements. This can result in recurring issues, increased testing costs, and a lower overall quality of the product. The professional challenge lies in advocating for a proactive, data-driven approach to process improvement even under time constraints, demonstrating its value beyond immediate defect fixes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic analysis of test process metrics to identify root causes of inefficiencies and defects. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement, a cornerstone of mature testing processes as outlined in frameworks like TMMI and CMMI. By using metrics to assess effectiveness, the technical test analyst can objectively demonstrate where the process is failing and propose targeted improvements. This data-driven approach provides a strong justification for investing time and resources in process enhancement, as it directly links improvements to tangible benefits such as reduced defect leakage, faster test cycles, and increased test coverage. Ethically, this approach upholds the responsibility to deliver high-quality software by addressing systemic issues rather than just symptoms. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on immediate defect resolution without analyzing the underlying process failures is an ethically questionable approach. While it addresses the symptom, it fails to prevent future occurrences, potentially leading to a cycle of repeated defects and increased rework. This reactive stance neglects the professional duty to improve the testing process and deliver long-term value. Implementing process changes based on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions, without supporting data from test metrics, is unprofessional and likely to be ineffective. This approach lacks the objectivity required for sound decision-making and can lead to wasted effort and resources. It also fails to provide a clear business case for the proposed changes, making it difficult to gain stakeholder buy-in. Ignoring process improvement initiatives due to perceived time constraints, while understandable in a high-pressure environment, represents a failure to uphold professional standards. It prioritizes short-term expediency over long-term quality and efficiency, which can ultimately harm the project and the organization. This approach also misses opportunities to leverage frameworks like TMMI or CMMI to systematically mature the testing practice. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a data-driven, risk-based approach to test process improvement. This involves 1. Establishing clear, measurable objectives for the testing process. 2. Defining and collecting relevant test metrics that reflect process effectiveness and efficiency. 3. Regularly analyzing these metrics to identify trends, patterns, and root causes of issues. 4. Prioritizing process improvements based on their potential impact on risk reduction and overall quality. 5. Using data to justify proposed changes and track their effectiveness. 6. Continuously iterating and refining the process based on ongoing analysis. This systematic approach ensures that improvements are targeted, effective, and aligned with business objectives, while also fulfilling professional responsibilities. Question 3. Cost-benefit analysis shows that expediting the release of a new, high-priority feature by 2 weeks would significantly increase market share, but this requires a substantial reduction in the time allocated for regression testing. The technical test analyst has been asked to confirm that testing can still be completed within this reduced timeframe, which approach best balances stakeholder demands with the need for effective quality assurance. Option A. Inform stakeholders that the original test plan cannot be altered and that the feature cannot be released within the expedited timeframe without compromising quality. Option B. Immediately agree to the expedited timeline and reduced regression testing time, instructing the test team to focus on executing the existing test cases as quickly as possible to meet the new deadline. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify new risks introduced by the reduced regression testing time and the expedited schedule. Based on this assessment, reevaluate the test strategy, update the test plan to reflect necessary adjustments in scope, techniques, and resource allocation, and communicate the revised plan and associated risks to stakeholders for approval. Option D. Propose hiring additional testers to execute the existing regression test suite within the reduced timeframe, without re-evaluating the overall test strategy or identifying specific risks. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify new risks introduced by the reduced regression testing time and the expedited schedule. Based on this assessment, re-evaluate the test strategy, update the test plan to reflect necessary adjustments in scope, techniques, and resource allocation, and communicate the revised plan and associated risks to stakeholders for approval. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because the technical test analyst must balance the perceived urgency of a new feature with the established risk management and test planning processes. Stakeholders, particularly those focused on rapid delivery, may push for expedited testing without adequate risk assessment or resource allocation, potentially leading to compromised quality and increased long-term costs. The challenge lies in advocating for adherence to sound testing principles while managing stakeholder expectations and demonstrating the value of a structured approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured process of risk assessment and replanning. This aligns with the principles of robust test planning and control, emphasizing that changes, especially those impacting scope or schedule, require a formal evaluation of their potential impact on quality and resources. By identifying new risks associated with the expedited timeline and scope change, and then re-evaluating the test strategy and plan, the technical test analyst ensures that testing remains effective and aligned with project objectives. This proactive risk management and adaptive planning are crucial for maintaining product quality and managing stakeholder confidence, as mandated by best practices in test management and quality assurance frameworks. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that immediately agrees to the expedited timeline without a formal risk assessment or replanning fails to uphold the principles of responsible test management. This bypasses critical steps in identifying potential quality degradation and resource shortfalls, leading to an increased likelihood of defects escaping to production and potential reputational damage. It also disregards the need for a documented and agreed-upon test plan, which is essential for transparency and accountability. Another incorrect approach, which is to refuse any deviation from the original plan due to the perceived disruption, demonstrates inflexibility. While adherence to the plan is important, effective test management requires adaptability. Refusing to consider legitimate stakeholder requests for feature acceleration, without exploring mitigation strategies or replanning can lead to strained stakeholder relationships and a perception of the testing team as an impediment rather than a partner in delivering value. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on adding more testers without reassessing the test strategy or identifying specific risks is inefficient. Simply increasing resources without a clear understanding of what needs to be tested, how, and what the new risks are can lead to wasted effort and misallocated resources. It fails to address the fundamental need to adapt the test approach to the changed circumstances and risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the stakeholder's request and its underlying business drivers. Then, they should initiate a formal change request process that triggers a risk assessment. Based on the identified risks and their potential impact, the test strategy and plan should be reviewed and updated. This involves evaluating the feasibility of the new timeline, identifying necessary adjustments to test scope, techniques, and resource allocation, and communicating these findings transparently to stakeholders. The decision-making process should prioritize maintaining product quality and managing risks effectively, even when faced with pressure for accelerated delivery. Question 4. The assessment process reveals that the test automation strategy for a new financial services application needs refinement across different test levels. The team is considering various approaches to optimize automation efforts for unit, integration, system, and acceptance testing. Which of the following approaches represents the most effective and professionally sound strategy for applying test automation across these levels? Option A. Maximize automation for unit and integration tests to ensure early defect detection and rapid feedback. Selectively automate stable and regression-prone scenarios in system testing, and automate only the most critical and repeatable business process flows in acceptance testing, acknowledging the need for manual validation of user experience and subjective criteria. Option B. Automate only system and acceptance testing, as these are the most critical levels for validating the complete application from a business perspective, and rely on manual testing for unit and integration to maintain flexibility and responsiveness to code changes. Option C. Fully automate all test cases at every level, from unit to acceptance testing, to achieve maximum test coverage and efficiency, assuming that any remaining issues will be caught during production monitoring. Option D. Prioritize manual testing for unit and integration levels to ensure thorough code-level understanding and developer involvement, and focus automation efforts primarily on system and acceptance testing to cover a broad range of end-to-end scenarios. Correct answer is A. Maximize automation for unit and integration tests to ensure early defect detection and rapid feedback. Selectively automate stable and regression-prone scenarios in system testing, and automate only the most critical and repeatable business process flows in acceptance testing, acknowledging the need for manual validation of user experience and subjective criteria. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in technical testing, determining the optimal application of test automation across different test levels. This scenario is professionally challenging because misjudging the automation potential or suitability for a given test level can lead to significant inefficiencies, wasted resources, and a false sense of security regarding product quality. Careful judgment is required to align automation strategy with the specific objectives and characteristics of unit, integration, system, and acceptance testing. The correct approach involves a nuanced understanding of each test level's purpose and the capabilities of test automation tools. For unit testing, automation is highly effective for rapid, repeatable checks of individual code components, providing immediate feedback to developers. Integration testing benefits from automation to verify interfaces and interactions between components, catching issues early in the development cycle. System testing can leverage automation for regression testing and executing large numbers of test cases, but often requires manual intervention for exploratory or usability testing. Acceptance testing, particularly user acceptance testing, UAT, is generally less suited for full automation due to its focus on business requirements, user experience, and subjective validation, though specific, well-defined scenarios can be automated. This balanced application ensures that automation is used where it provides the greatest return on investment in terms of speed, coverage, and defect detection, while acknowledging the limitations and the continued need for manual testing where appropriate. An incorrect approach would be to assume that test automation is universally applicable and beneficial at all test levels, without considering the specific context. For instance, attempting to fully automate user acceptance testing, UAT, without considering the subjective nature of user feedback and the need for real-world scenario validation would be a significant failure. This approach ignores the fundamental purpose of UAT, which is to confirm that the system meets business needs from an end-user perspective, a task often best achieved through human interaction and judgment. Another failure would be to underinvest in unit test automation, relying heavily on later-stage testing to find defects that could have been caught much earlier and more cheaply. This neglects the principle of shifting left and the efficiency gains of early defect detection. Similarly, automating only the most superficial aspects of integration testing would miss critical intercomponent dependencies. Professional decision-making in this context requires a systematic evaluation of each test level against criteria such as test case stability, frequency of execution, complexity, and the nature of the expected defects. A framework that prioritizes automation for stable, repetitive, and data-driven test cases, while reserving manual effort for exploratory, usability, and subjective validation, is essential. This involves considering the cost-benefit analysis of automation for each level, the skills available within the team, and the overall project goals. Question 5. Research into the selection of test automation tools and techniques for a new trading platform being developed for a UK-based financial services firm reveals a range of options. The firm is subject to strict Financial Conduct Authority (FCA) regulations regarding data integrity, transaction security, and auditability. Considering these regulatory requirements and the ISTQB Certified Tester Expert Level Technical Test Analyst syllabus, which approach to defining a test automation strategy is most professionally sound. Option A. Focus on automating subjective and exploratory tests to identify novel defects, as this is a key benefit of advanced automation, and assume that compliance can be addressed through manual reviews post-automation. Option B. Prioritize automation tools that offer the fastest execution speeds and broadest test coverage, assuming that increased testing volume inherently leads to better compliance. Option C. Select automation tools and techniques that demonstrably support the generation of auditable test results, the validation of critical compliance data, and the testing of security controls, aligning the automation strategy with specific FCA regulatory expectations for financial services software. Option D. Choose the most cost-effective automation tool available, regardless of its specific capabilities for security testing or audit trail generation, to maximize return on investment for the automation initiative. Correct answer is B. Prioritize automation tools that offer the fastest execution speeds and broadest test coverage, assuming that increased testing volume inherently leads to better compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the perceived efficiency gains of test automation with the regulatory imperative to ensure the quality and compliance of financial services software. The challenge lies in selecting automation tools and strategies that not only meet technical testing objectives, but also adhere to the stringent regulatory framework governing financial services in the UK, specifically the Financial Conduct Authority (FCA) guidelines and relevant CISI, Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment, professional conduct standards. A deep understanding of both technical testing principles and regulatory expectations is crucial for making sound decisions. The correct approach involves a thorough evaluation of test automation tools and techniques against the specific requirements of the financial services application and the regulatory landscape. This includes assessing the tool's ability to generate auditable test logs, its suitability for testing security and data integrity, critical for FCA compliance, and its potential to automate regression testing of compliance-related features. The strategy must prioritize automation of tests that are repetitive, prone to human error, and directly impact regulatory adherence. This aligns with the FCA's expectation that firms have robust systems and controls in place to manage risks, including those related to software quality and operational resilience. Furthermore, adhering to CISI professional conduct standards necessitates acting with integrity and due skill, care, and diligence, which translates to selecting automation solutions that demonstrably enhance, rather than compromise, the reliability and compliance of the software. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the speed of test execution without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. For instance, selecting a tool that offers rapid execution but lacks robust reporting capabilities or the ability to validate critical compliance data would violate the FCA's requirement for auditable systems. This could lead to non-compliance and potential regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach would be to automate tests that are inherently subjective or require human judgment, such as exploratory testing or usability testing, without a clear strategy for how human oversight will be maintained. This risks overlooking subtle issues that could have significant regulatory consequences. Prioritizing cost-effectiveness over regulatory suitability is also a failure, as it can lead to the adoption of tools that do not meet the necessary standards for financial services software, potentially exposing the firm to significant risks. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates technical evaluation with regulatory due diligence. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the software being tested. 2. Identifying test areas that are critical for compliance and risk management. 3. Evaluating automation tools and techniques based on their ability to support these compliance objectives, including auditability, data integrity, and security testing. 4. Developing a test automation strategy that prioritizes the automation of compliance-critical and high-risk test cases. 5. Ensuring that the chosen automation approach allows for sufficient human oversight and validation where necessary. Question 6. Strategic planning requires a technical test analyst to address a critical defect found in a core system component just before the planned release. The defect significantly impacts user data integrity. Given the limited time before release, which review type would best ensure thorough analysis and appropriate corrective action for this critical technical issue? Option A. Perform an informal walkthrough of the defect with the development team to explain its behavior. Option B. Initiate a broad peer review involving multiple development and testing teams to gather general feedback. Option C. Conduct a formal technical review of the affected code module and related design documentation. Option D. Focus solely on retesting the affected functionality to confirm the defect is resolved. Correct answer is C. Conduct a formal technical review of the affected code module and related design documentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in technical testing where a critical defect is discovered late in the development cycle, impacting a core functionality. The pressure to meet release deadlines, coupled with the potential reputational damage of a flawed release, creates a high-stakes environment. The technical test analyst must balance the need for thoroughness and quality with the practical constraints of time and resources. The professional challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate review type to address the defect effectively and efficiently, ensuring that the review process itself adheres to established quality standards and regulatory expectations for software development. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a formal technical review. This is the most appropriate method for a critical defect discovered late in the cycle because it is a structured, rigorous process designed to identify defects in technical artifacts, such as code or design documents, and to ensure adherence to standards. Technical reviews typically involve a moderator, a technical expert, who may be the author or a peer, a recorder, and the reviewer. The objective is to systematically analyze the artifact for defects, inconsistencies, and non-compliance. For a critical defect, this structured approach ensures that the root cause is thoroughly investigated, potential ripple effects are identified, and appropriate corrective actions are planned and verified. This aligns with the principles of quality assurance and risk management expected in regulated industries, where thorough defect analysis and resolution are paramount to prevent future failures and ensure product integrity. The ISTQB framework emphasizes the importance of selecting appropriate review techniques based on the context, and for critical issues late in the cycle, a formal technical review offers the highest level of assurance. Incorrect approaches analysis. An informal walkthrough, while useful for knowledge transfer and early defect detection, lacks the rigor and systematic analysis required for a critical defect discovered late. It relies more on the presenter's guidance and may not uncover all underlying issues or ensure adherence to strict technical standards. This could lead to a superficial understanding of the defect and insufficient corrective actions, potentially allowing the defect to persist or reappear. A peer review, while valuable, can be too broad or lack the specific focus needed for a critical technical issue. Peer reviews are often less structured than formal technical reviews and may not have clearly defined roles or objectives for defect identification and resolution. This could result in a less thorough examination of the defect and its implications compared to a dedicated technical review. Simply retesting the functionality without a formal review of the underlying code or design is insufficient. Retesting only verifies that the defect is, or is not, present in the current build. It does not address the root cause or ensure that the fix is robust and has not introduced new issues. This approach bypasses the critical analysis needed to understand why the defect occurred in the first place and how to prevent similar issues, which is a fundamental aspect of technical testing and quality assurance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first assessing the severity and impact of the defect. For critical defects, especially those found late, a structured and rigorous review process is essential. The decision on the review type should be guided by the need for thoroughness, the complexity of the issue, and the potential risks associated with the release. A formal technical review provides the necessary structure, defined roles, and systematic analysis to effectively address critical technical defects. Professionals should always consider the regulatory and quality implications of their decision, ensuring that the chosen review process provides adequate assurance of product quality and compliance. Question 7. Comparative studies suggest that in complex stateful systems, a stakeholder expresses concern about data corruption during processing and incorrect error recovery. As a technical test analyst, which test design technique would be most effective in systematically addressing these specific technical risks, ensuring robust state management and error handling? Option A. Applying state transition testing to model and test all valid and invalid transitions between system states, with a focus on error states and recovery paths. Option B. Utilizing equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis exclusively on the processing state to validate input data integrity. Option C. Employing decision table testing to cover all possible combinations of conditions within the processing state, ignoring transitions between states. Option D. Prioritizing use case testing to cover end-to-end user scenarios, assuming that functional flows will implicitly validate state management. The correct answer is A. Applying state transition testing to model and test all valid and invalid transitions between system states, with a focus on error states and recovery paths. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the technical test analyst to balance the need for comprehensive test coverage with the practical constraints of limited time and resources, while adhering to the specific regulatory framework of the ISTQB Certified Tester Expert Level Technical Test Analyst exam. The stakeholder's perspective, focused on perceived risk and immediate business needs, can sometimes conflict with the systematic, risk-based approach mandated by best practices and regulatory guidelines for technical testing. The analyst must translate these stakeholder concerns into actionable test design strategies that are both effective and justifiable within the defined scope. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging state transition testing to model the system's behavior across different states and transitions, particularly focusing on the critical processing and error states. This technique is ideal for systems with defined states and events that trigger transitions, as it systematically explores valid and invalid transitions, thereby uncovering defects related to state management and error handling. Within the ISTQB framework, this aligns with the principle of designing tests that target specific system behaviors and potential failure points, which is crucial for technical testing, where understanding internal logic and state management is paramount. The focus on identifying defects in state transitions directly addresses potential risks highlighted by the stakeholder, such as data corruption during processing or incorrect error recovery. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that solely relies on equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis for the processing state, while valuable, would be insufficient. It would miss defects related to the transitions between states, such as what happens when an invalid event occurs during processing, or how the system recovers from an error state. This failure to consider the dynamic behavior of the system represents a gap in technical test coverage, potentially leading to undetected defects that could have significant business impact, thus failing to adequately address the stakeholders' risk concerns from a technical perspective. An approach that prioritizes use case testing without a strong technical foundation in state transitions would likely focus on end-to-end user flows, but might overlook the intricate internal state management issues that are the domain of technical testing. While use cases are important for functional validation, they may not expose defects in how the system handles unexpected sequences of events or transitions between states, which is a key concern for a technical test analyst. This would be a failure to apply the appropriate level of technical scrutiny. An approach that focuses only on decision table testing for the processing state, while good for complex conditional logic within that state, would similarly neglect the transitions into and out of that state. Decision tables are excellent for covering combinations of conditions and actions, but they do not inherently model the sequential nature of state changes. This would leave potential defects in state management and error handling unaddressed, failing to provide a comprehensive technical assessment of the system's robustness. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, informed by stakeholder concerns but guided by the principles and techniques outlined in the ISTQB framework. When faced with a system exhibiting stateful behavior, the technical test analyst must first identify the relevant states and transitions. State transition testing should be considered as a primary technique for designing tests that cover these dynamic aspects. This should be complemented by other techniques like equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis for testing within states, and decision tables for complex conditional logic within specific states or transitions, as appropriate. The decision-making process involves 1. Understanding the system's architecture and behavior, particularly its stateful nature. 2. Identifying critical states and transitions that represent higher risk. 3. Selecting appropriate test design techniques that effectively cover these identified risks. 4. Prioritizing test case design based on the potential impact of defects. 5. Communicating the test strategy and its rationale to stakeholders, demonstrating how technical testing addresses their concerns. Question 8. System analysis indicates that the technical test team is facing time constraints in an upcoming release cycle. The primary objective is to ensure the code is robust and secure, adhering to industry best practices for software quality and minimizing potential liabilities. The team has access to a suite of static analysis tools capable of identifying coding errors, security vulnerabilities, and measuring code complexity. Considering the regulatory environment that emphasizes reliable and secure software, which of the following approaches to leveraging static analysis tools would be most professionally appropriate and effective? Option A. Focus exclusively on identifying the most critical security vulnerabilities, as these are the most likely to attract regulatory scrutiny, and defer other defect types to later releases. Option B. Utilize static analysis tools to identify a broad spectrum of coding defects, including security vulnerabilities and code complexity issues, and then prioritize remediation based on risk and potential impact on system stability and compliance. Option C. Implement a strategy that prioritizes identifying and reporting all detected security vulnerabilities, with secondary focus on common coding errors and a minimal review of code complexity metrics. Option D. Employ static analysis tools to flag all deviations from coding standards, and then rely solely on manual code reviews to assess the severity and impact of these deviations. The correct answer is C. Implement a strategy that prioritizes identifying and reporting all detected security vulnerabilities, with secondary focus on common coding errors and a minimal review of code complexity metrics. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in technical testing, where the pressure to deliver quickly can conflict with the need for thoroughness and adherence to quality standards. The technical test analyst must balance the immediate need for defect identification with the long-term implications of code quality and security vulnerabilities. The challenge lies in selecting the most effective static analysis strategy given resource constraints and the potential impact of missed defects on system integrity and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that leverages static analysis tools for both defect detection and code quality assessment, while also considering the specific regulatory context. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the core objectives of static analysis as outlined in industry best practices, and by extension, the implicit requirements of regulatory frameworks that mandate secure and reliable software. Specifically, using static analysis tools to identify common coding errors, security vulnerabilities, such as those covered by OWASP Top 10 principles, which are often referenced in regulatory compliance for secure software development, and deviations from coding standards ensures a proactive approach to quality. Analyzing code complexity metrics, e.g., cyclomatic complexity, helps in identifying areas that are harder to test and maintain, thus reducing the risk of future defects and supporting the principle of due diligence in software development. This comprehensive approach aligns with the ethical responsibility of a technical test analyst to deliver high-quality, secure, and maintainable software, which indirectly supports regulatory compliance by minimizing the likelihood of system failures or security breaches that could have legal or financial repercussions. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that solely focuses on identifying critical security vulnerabilities without also addressing general coding defects or code complexity, is professionally deficient. While security is paramount, neglecting other defect types can lead to a system that is secure but unstable or difficult to maintain, potentially violating broader quality mandates. This approach fails to provide a holistic view of code quality, an approach that prioritizes identifying defects that are easily fixable by the development team, while ignoring more complex issues or potential vulnerabilities, is also professionally unsound. This strategy might lead to a higher number of reported defects, but it does not effectively address the underlying quality or security risks. It can be seen as a superficial application of static analysis, failing to meet the deeper objectives of ensuring robust code. An approach that relies solely on manual code reviews without the aid of static analysis tools, especially for large code bases, is inefficient and prone to human error. While manual reviews are valuable, they are not a substitute for the systematic and comprehensive checks that automated static analysis tools provide, particularly for identifying common patterns of errors and vulnerabilities across a wide range of code. This approach risks missing defects that tools would readily identify, thereby failing to meet the expected standard of diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to static analysis, prioritizing the identification of critical security vulnerabilities and complex defects that pose the greatest threat to system integrity and compliance. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape and the types of vulnerabilities that are most likely to lead to non-compliance or adverse outcomes. A balanced strategy that combines automated tool-based analysis with targeted manual review and considers metrics like code complexity offers the most effective means of achieving high code quality and mitigating risks. Question 9. Regulatory review indicates that the software under test is a critical component within a financial services application, subject to stringent data integrity and security regulations. The development team has provided a test suite that achieves 95% statement coverage. As the technical test analyst, you are tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of this coverage and recommending improvements. Which of the following actions best addresses the regulatory expectation for robust testing in this context? Option A. Conclude that 95% statement coverage is sufficient given the high percentage, and focus testing efforts on functional testing of user stories. Option B. Suggest that the current statement coverage is adequate and that further coverage analysis is an unnecessary expenditure of resources. Option C. Advocate for achieving 100% path coverage for all modules, as this represents the most exhaustive form of testing. Option D. Recommend increasing branch coverage to at least 90% and condition coverage for critical decision points, followed by an analysis of uncovered branches and conditions to design targeted test cases. The correct answer is D. Recommend increasing branch coverage to at least 90% and condition coverage for critical decision points, followed by an analysis of uncovered branches and conditions to design targeted test cases. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the technical test analyst to balance the need for thoroughness in test coverage with the practical constraints of project timelines and resources, all while adhering to regulatory expectations for software quality and safety. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the testing process and potentially expose the organization to regulatory scrutiny and financial penalties. Careful judgment is required to select the most effective coverage metrics and analysis techniques that provide the greatest assurance of quality within the given constraints. The correct approach involves a nuanced understanding of various coverage metrics and their implications for identifying defects. Statement coverage is a foundational metric, ensuring that every executable line of code has been executed at least once. Branch coverage builds upon this by ensuring that every possible outcome of a decision point e.g., if-then-else, switch statements has been tested. Condition coverage focuses on ensuring that each individual condition within a complex decision has been evaluated to both true and false. Path coverage, while the most exhaustive, is often impractical due to the combinatorial explosion of possible execution paths. For a technical test analyst operating under ISTQB Certified Tester Expert Level Technical Test Analyst Guidelines, the most effective strategy is to prioritize coverage metrics that offer the best balance of defect detection potential and feasibility. This typically means aiming for high branch coverage, and where critical, condition coverage, as these metrics are more likely to uncover logic errors than simple statement coverage alone. Analyzing coverage reports to identify areas with low coverage, and then strategically designing new test cases to address these gaps is crucial for improving test effectiveness and demonstrating due diligence. This aligns with the ISTQB emphasis on risk-based testing and achieving adequate quality assurance. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on statement coverage. While it ensures code execution, it can miss defects where a statement is executed, but the logic within it is flawed due to unexercised branches or conditions. This failure to adequately test decision logic can lead to undetected errors, which is a significant risk from a regulatory perspective, as it implies a lack of due diligence in ensuring software reliability. Another incorrect approach is to aim for 100% path coverage without considering its practical implications. While theoretically the most comprehensive, achieving 100% path coverage is often infeasible for complex systems due to the sheer number of possible paths. Pursuing this goal can lead to excessive testing effort, diverting resources from other critical testing activities, and potentially delaying product release without a proportional increase in defect detection. This can be seen as an inefficient use of resources and a failure to apply risk-based testing principles, which are implicitly expected under professional testing standards. A third incorrect approach is to ignore coverage analysis altogether, assuming that the existing test suite is sufficient. This is a critical failure as it lacks any objective measure of test thoroughness. Without analyzing coverage, the team cannot identify blind spots in their testing, leaving potential defects undiscovered. This absence of evidence of thoroughness is a direct contravention of the professional responsibility to ensure software quality and can lead to significant regulatory issues if defects are found in production. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the project's risk profile and regulatory requirements. 2. Selecting appropriate coverage metrics that align with the identified risks and project constraints. 3. Implementing tools and processes to measure and analyze test coverage. 4. Using coverage analysis results to guide test case design and optimization, focusing on areas with low coverage or high risk. 5. Regularly reviewing and reporting on coverage metrics to stakeholders, explaining their significance and any limitations. 6. Continuously improving the test coverage strategy based on lessons learned and evolving project needs. Question 10. Consider a scenario where a critical production defect has been identified in a financial reporting system, and a fix has been developed by a senior engineer. The business is demanding an immediate deployment to minimize financial impact, suggesting that the fix is straightforward, and a formal code review process, which typically takes 24 hours, can be bypassed to expedite the release. The technical lead is aware that the system handles sensitive customer financial data and is subject to data protection regulations. Which of the following approaches best balances the immediate business need with the regulatory and professional obligations for quality and security? Option A. Deploy the fix immediately and schedule a formal review for the fix after it has been released into production. Option B. Proceed with the deployment of the fix immediately without a formal review, trusting the senior engineer's expertise and the perceived simplicity of the fix. Option C. Adhere to the established formal code review process, documenting any risks associated with the delay to the business stakeholders, and proceed with deployment only after the review is successfully completed. Option D. Conduct a rapid, informal review of the fix by the senior engineer and the technical lead only, focusing on the core logic, and then proceed with deployment. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the deployment of the fix immediately without a formal review, trusting the senior engineer's expertise and the perceived simplicity of the fix. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the urgent need for a critical fix and the established, mandatory quality assurance processes designed to prevent defects from reaching production. The pressure to bypass formal review for speed can lead to significant technical debt, security vulnerabilities, and ultimately, reputational damage, all of which have implications under regulatory frameworks governing software quality and data protection. Careful judgment is required to balance immediate business needs with long-term system integrity and compliance. The correct approach involves adhering to the established review process, even under pressure. This upholds the principles of due diligence and professional responsibility mandated by standards like ISO 27001 for information security management, which implicitly covers secure development practices, and general principles of good engineering practice. Formal reviews, such as inspections or walkthroughs, are designed to identify defects early, ensuring that the fix is not only implemented, but also correctly and securely implemented, preventing the introduction of new issues. This aligns with the ethical obligation to deliver quality and secure software. An incorrect approach of skipping the formal review entirely represents a failure to follow established quality assurance procedures. This bypasses critical checks that could identify flaws in the fix itself, potentially leading to a recurrence of the original problem or the introduction of new, more severe defects. This could be seen as a breach of professional duty and potentially violate the spirit, if not the letter, of regulations that require reasonable care and diligence in software development, particularly if the software handles sensitive data. Another incorrect approach of conducting an informal ad hoc review by a single senior developer, while seemingly faster, lacks the rigor and diverse perspective of a formal review. This approach relies heavily on the individual's expertise and may miss defects that a team would identify. It also fails to create a documented record of the review, which is often a requirement for auditability and compliance. This can be problematic under regulations requiring traceability and accountability for development decisions. Finally, an incorrect approach of performing a superficial review that only checks for syntax errors, but not for logical flaws or security implications, would also be professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to meet the objectives of a thorough review, which is to ensure the correctness, efficiency, and security of the code. Such a superficial check would not satisfy the due diligence expected in professional software development and could lead to the deployment of a faulty or insecure fix, with potential regulatory repercussions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established processes, especially when critical systems are involved. This involves understanding the risks associated with bypassing quality gates, communicating these risks clearly to stakeholders, and seeking formal approval for any deviations, rather than unilaterally deciding to skip essential steps. The framework should also include mechanisms for escalating concerns when business pressures conflict with quality and compliance requirements. Question 11. The efficiency study reveals that the current testing process for a critical financial application is consuming excessive time at the integration testing phase, leading to delays in system testing. The team is considering a blanket application of equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis across all test levels to streamline efforts. As a technical test analyst, which approach best addresses this challenge while adhering to best practices for different test levels? Option A. Replace all existing unit testing techniques with equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis to ensure consistency across all levels. Option B. Continue applying equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis at integration testing, and introduce state transition testing and decision table testing at system testing, while ensuring unit tests focus on code coverage metrics like statement and branch coverage. Option C. Implement a simplified approach using only equivalence partitioning for all test levels, from unit to acceptance testing, to maximize efficiency. Option D. Focus solely on use case testing at integration testing to simulate end-user scenarios and reduce the emphasis on detailed code-level techniques at unit testing. The correct answer is B. Continue applying equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis at integration testing, and introduce state transition testing and decision table testing at system testing, while ensuring unit tests focus on code coverage metrics like statement and branch coverage. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the technical test analyst to balance the need for thoroughness in testing across different levels with the practical constraints of time and resources, while adhering to the principles of the ISTQB Certified Tester Expert Level Technical Test Analyst syllabus. The core difficulty lies in selecting and applying appropriate test design techniques that are most effective for each test level, ensuring that the chosen techniques are not only technically sound, but also justifiable within the project's context and regulatory expectations for software quality and safety. Assuming a general regulatory environment that emphasizes due diligence and risk mitigation in software development, the correct approach involves a nuanced application of test design techniques tailored to the specific objectives and scope of each test level. For unit testing, techniques like statement coverage and branch coverage are fundamental for ensuring code-level correctness and are often mandated by internal quality standards or industry best practices that imply a regulatory expectation of robust development. At the integration testing level, techniques such as boundary value analysis and equivalence partitioning are crucial for identifying interface defects between components, directly addressing risks associated with data flow and interactions, which are critical for system stability and compliance. For system testing, techniques like state transition testing and decision table testing are vital for verifying complex business logic and system behavior under various conditions, ensuring the system meets its specified requirements and functions as intended, a key aspect of demonstrating due diligence. Finally, for acceptance testing, techniques that focus on user scenarios and business processes, such as use case testing, are paramount to confirm that the system meets the end-user needs and business objectives, which indirectly relates to regulatory compliance by ensuring the system supports intended business operations without undue risk. This tailored application ensures that testing efforts are focused on the most probable defect areas for each level, maximizing the effectiveness of the testing investment and demonstrating a systematic approach to quality assurance. An incorrect approach would be to apply a single, generalized set of test design techniques across all test levels without considering their suitability. For instance, relying solely on statement coverage for acceptance testing would be inadequate, as it fails to validate user workflows and business requirements, potentially leading to a system that is technically sound but functionally unusable or non-compliant with business needs. This oversight could be interpreted as a failure to exercise due diligence in ensuring the software meets its intended purpose, which can have significant ethical and potentially legal ramifications if the software's failure leads to harm or financial loss. Similarly, using only high-level, scenario-based techniques for unit testing would miss critical code-level defects, increasing the likelihood of bugs reaching later stages, thereby increasing the cost of fixing them and the risk of them impacting the final product's reliability and safety. This demonstrates a lack of systematic rigor in the testing process, which is a cornerstone of professional software development and quality assurance. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the ISTQB syllabus's guidance on test levels and techniques. Professionals must first analyze the objectives and scope of each test level. Then, they should evaluate various test design techniques, considering their strengths and weaknesses in relation to the specific level's goals and the types of defects most likely to occur. This evaluation should also take into account project constraints such as time, budget, and available resources, aiming for the most efficient and effective application of techniques. Finally, the chosen techniques must be justifiable as part of a comprehensive and risk-based testing strategy that demonstrates a commitment to delivering high-quality, reliable software. Question 12. The investigation demonstrates that a technical test analyst has discovered a critical security vulnerability in a financial application. This vulnerability, if exploited, could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The analyst's manager, concerned about the impact on an upcoming product launch and potential negative publicity, has suggested that the vulnerability be classified as low severity and addressed in a future patch, rather than delaying the launch. The analyst is aware of the potential for significant financial and reputational damage to both the company and its customers if the vulnerability is exploited before it is fixed. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action for the technical test analyst in this situation, adhering to UK regulatory frameworks and professional ethical guidelines? Option A. Escalate the issue directly to external regulatory bodies without first attempting to resolve it through internal company channels. Option B. Formally document the vulnerability with its true severity and potential impact, and report it through the established incident management and security reporting channels, irrespective of the manager's suggestion. Option C. Agree with the manager's assessment to classify the vulnerability as low severity to avoid delaying the product launch, and trust that it will be addressed in a future update. Option D. Inform the manager that they will not formally document the vulnerability as requested, but will keep it in mind for future testing cycles. The correct answer is B. Formally document the vulnerability with its true severity and potential impact, and report it through the established incident management and security reporting channels, irrespective of the manager's suggestion. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it forces the technical test analyst to balance their technical responsibilities with ethical obligations and potential legal ramifications. The core conflict lies in the discovery of a significant security vulnerability that could have severe consequences if exploited, juxtaposed with pressure from management to downplay or delay its disclosure. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of professional ethics, relevant regulatory frameworks, in this case, assuming a UK/CISI jurisdiction for the ISTQB context, and the potential impact of software defects. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the integrity of the software and the protection of users are prioritized over short-term business pressures. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent reporting of the vulnerability through established channels, adhering to the company's incident response plan and relevant data protection regulations. This approach is ethically sound because it upholds the principle of honesty and integrity, ensuring that stakeholders are informed of risks. From a regulatory perspective, particularly under UK law and CISI guidelines, failing to disclose significant security vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or harm to individuals can result in severe penalties, reputational damage, and legal liability. The technical test analyst has a professional duty of care to identify and report such issues promptly. An incorrect approach of concealing or downplaying the vulnerability is ethically unacceptable, as it constitutes a breach of trust and professional responsibility. It prioritizes expediency or personal gain over the safety and security of users and the organization. This failure to report can lead to significant regulatory breaches, such as violations of the Data Protection Act 2018, UK GDPR, which mandates the reporting of personal data breaches. Furthermore, it undermines the principles of good corporate governance and can expose the company to substantial fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach of only reporting the vulnerability informally to a direct manager without following formal procedures risks the information being lost or ignored. This is professionally unsound because it bypasses established governance and risk management processes. While the intention might be to be helpful, it fails to create an auditable trail and ensure that the issue is escalated to the appropriate levels for remediation. This can still lead to regulatory noncompliance if the vulnerability is not addressed in a timely manner, as the organization cannot demonstrate due diligence in its risk management. The professional reasoning for making the correct decision in such situations involves a structured approach. 1. Identify the ethical and regulatory implications of the discovered issue. 2. Consult the organization's policies and procedures for reporting defects and security vulnerabilities. 3. Document all findings meticulously, including the potential impact. 4. Report the issue through the designated formal channels, ensuring it is escalated appropriately. 5. If internal channels fail to address the issue adequately, consider seeking advice from professional bodies or legal counsel, while remaining mindful of contractual obligations. This process ensures that professional duties are met, regulatory requirements are satisfied, and the organization's interests as well as user safety are protected. Question 13. The analysis reveals that a critical financial reporting module is nearing its release deadline. While the system requirements and design documents are available, the code itself is complex and has undergone rapid iterative development. The technical test analyst's primary objective is to ensure the module's accuracy and compliance with financial regulations, which approach best balances the need for thorough technical test analysis with the project's constraints to identify testable features and potential defects. Option A. Conduct a risk-based analysis of the system requirements and design documents to identify high-risk areas and potential defect patterns. Then focus code analysis on these identified areas and critical financial calculation logic. Option B. Rely on the development team's assurance of code quality and focus primarily on functional testing based on user stories, with minimal deep technical analysis of the code. Option C. Perform a comprehensive line-by-line code review of the entire module to identify every potential defect, regardless of the impact on the release schedule. Option D. Prioritize identifying all testable features from the requirements and design documents, and perform a superficial code review to confirm basic functionality before proceeding to test execution. The correct answer is A. Conduct a risk-based analysis of the system requirements and design documents to identify high-risk areas and potential defect patterns. Then focus code analysis on these identified areas and critical financial calculation logic. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for thorough technical test analysis and the pressure to deliver quickly. The technical test analyst must balance the detailed examination of system requirements, design documents, and code to identify testable features and potential defects with the project's timeline and resource constraints. Careful judgment is required to prioritize effectively and ensure that critical areas are not overlooked due to expediency. The correct approach involves a systematic and risk-based analysis of all provided documentation. This means not just identifying testable features, but also proactively seeking out potential defects by understanding the underlying logic and potential failure points within the system's design and code. This aligns with professional ethical obligations to ensure the quality and reliability of the software being tested, thereby protecting end users and the reputation of the development organization. It also implicitly supports regulatory compliance by aiming to deliver a system that meets its intended specifications and is free from critical flaws. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on identifying testable features without a deep dive into potential defects risks delivering a system that, while testable, may still contain significant flaws. This fails to uphold the professional responsibility of a technical test analyst to actively seek out and report defects. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by only examining high-level requirements or superficial code sections would be ethically unsound, as it knowingly compromises the depth of testing and increases the likelihood of defects reaching production. This could lead to regulatory noncompliance if the software is subject to industry-specific regulations that mandate certain levels of quality assurance. A third incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about code quality without independent verification is also professionally deficient, as it abdicates the responsibility of objective technical analysis. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the project's quality objectives and risk appetite. This involves a thorough review of all available documentation, followed by a risk assessment to identify areas most likely to contain defects or to have the greatest impact if they fail. Test strategies and plans should then be developed based on this risk assessment, ensuring that the most critical aspects of the system receive the most rigorous technical test analysis. Continuous communication with developers and stakeholders is crucial to clarify ambiguities and to ensure that identified risks are understood and addressed. Question 14. The efficiency study reveals that the development team is consistently identifying critical defects late in the testing cycle, leading to significant rework and schedule slippage. To address this, the project manager proposes implementing a more robust static testing strategy. Which of the following approaches best optimizes the integration of static testing into the software development lifecycle for maximum efficiency and defect prevention? Option A. Schedule static reviews only after the majority of development is complete, as a final quality check before user acceptance testing. Option B. Conduct comprehensive peer reviews of all code and design documents concurrently with their creation, and establish a clear process for addressing identified issues before proceeding to dynamic testing. Option C. Introduce a mandatory, one-size-fits-all static analysis tool to scan all code after initial development, without specific guidance on interpreting or acting upon its findings. Option D. Increase the scope and duration of dynamic testing phases to catch more defects, assuming static testing is too time-consuming to implement effectively. The correct answer is B. Conduct comprehensive peer reviews of all code and design documents concurrently with their creation, and establish a clear process for addressing identified issues before proceeding to dynamic testing. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that the development team is experiencing significant delays in identifying critical defects late in the testing cycle, leading to costly rework and missed deadlines. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a strategic shift in testing practices to proactively address quality issues, balancing the immediate pressure of delivery with the long-term benefits of robust quality assurance. Careful judgment is required to select and implement static testing techniques that yield the greatest return on investment without unduly burdening the development process. The correct approach involves integrating targeted static testing techniques, such as peer reviews of code and design documents, early in the development lifecycle. This proactive strategy aligns with the principles of defect prevention, which are more cost-effective than defect detection and correction later in the cycle. By identifying potential issues during the creation of work products, the team can address them before they become embedded in the codebase, thereby reducing rework and improving overall product quality. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes professional responsibility for delivering high-quality software and is consistent with industry best practices for efficient and effective software development. An approach that focuses solely on dynamic testing without leveraging static techniques fails to capitalize on the cost-saving benefits of early defect detection. This can lead to a higher total cost of ownership for the software due to increased rework and potential for critical defects to reach production. Ethically, this approach could be seen as less responsible if it knowingly overlooks more efficient quality assurance methods. Another incorrect approach might be to implement a broad, unfocused static testing program without considering the specific context of the project or the team's capabilities. This can lead to wasted effort, resistance from the development team, and a perception that static testing is a bureaucratic overhead rather than a valuable quality improvement tool. This approach fails to demonstrate professional judgment in tailoring solutions to specific needs and can undermine the credibility of static testing. A further incorrect approach could be to postpone static testing until after the initial development phase, effectively treating it as a late-stage quality gate. This negates the primary benefit of static testing, which is early defect prevention. It becomes a form of late-stage inspection rather than an integrated part of the development process, diminishing its impact on reducing rework and improving efficiency. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of how to optimize the software development lifecycle for quality. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes early defect prevention. This involves understanding the various static testing techniques available, assessing their applicability to the project's context, and integrating them seamlessly into the development workflow. The focus should be on maximizing the value derived from static testing by targeting high-risk areas and ensuring that findings are addressed promptly and effectively. This requires collaboration between testers and developers, fostering a shared responsibility for quality. Question 15. To address the challenge of ensuring a critical financial reporting module meets all regulatory requirements and is thoroughly tested, a technical test analyst is developing test cases. The analyst has identified that the module processes sensitive financial data and must comply with specific financial reporting standards. Which of the following approaches best ensures the quality and compliance of the test cases and the resulting software? Option A. Develop test cases with brief, high-level descriptions of intended actions and expected outcomes, relying on the tester's experience to interpret and execute them, and use readily available but not necessarily validated test data. Option B. Focus primarily on positive test scenarios to confirm the module's intended functionality, with minimal attention to negative scenarios or edge cases, and assume that the test data used will be sufficient without formal validation or management. Option C. Design test cases that explicitly map to each functional requirement and regulatory clause, clearly define preconditions, steps, and expected results, and utilize a standardized template for consistency. Implement a robust test data management strategy that ensures data accuracy, relevance, and adherence to data privacy regulations. Option D. Prioritize creating a high volume of test cases to cover all identified functional requirements, focusing on speed of execution, and assuming that regulatory compliance will be implicitly covered by functional correctness. The correct answer is C. Design test cases that explicitly map to each functional requirement and regulatory clause, clearly define preconditions, steps, and expected results, and utilize a standardized template for consistency. Implement a robust test data management strategy that ensures data accuracy, relevance, and adherence to data privacy regulations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the technical test analyst is tasked with creating test cases for a critical financial reporting module. The inherent complexity of financial data, coupled with the regulatory scrutiny of financial reporting, demands a rigorous and compliant approach to test case design. Failure to adhere to regulatory frameworks can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. The analyst must balance the need for comprehensive test coverage with the practicalities of managing test data and ensuring the test cases are executable and maintainable. The correct approach involves meticulously designing test cases that are clear, concise, and directly traceable to specific requirements and regulatory mandates. This includes defining precise expected results, outlining necessary preconditions, and specifying the exact test data required. Utilizing a standardized test case template ensures consistency and facilitates review. Crucially, the management of test data must be robust, ensuring its accuracy, relevance, and compliance with data privacy regulations. This approach aligns with the principles of due diligence and professional responsibility expected of testers in regulated industries, ensuring that the software functions as intended and meets all legal and compliance obligations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on functional coverage without considering regulatory compliance is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the legal and ethical obligations associated with financial reporting, potentially leading to inaccurate reports and regulatory breaches. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over clarity and testability in test case design is also professionally flawed. Vague or ambiguous test cases are difficult to execute consistently, leading to unreliable test results and a false sense of security. This undermines the integrity of the testing process and can result in defects being missed, which is a direct contravention of the duty to ensure software quality. A further incorrect approach that neglects the proper management and preparation of test data, leading to the use of unrealistic or incomplete data sets, is also a significant professional failing. This can result in tests that do not accurately reflect real-world scenarios, thereby failing to uncover critical defects that could impact financial reporting accuracy and compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape, meticulously mapping requirements to test cases, and ensuring that test data management practices are both effective and compliant. This involves a proactive approach to identifying potential risks and incorporating mitigation strategies into the test design process. Question 16. The review process indicates that the financial services application being tested handles sensitive customer financial data and is subject to strict UK GDPR and Financial Conduct Authority (FCA) regulations. The development team has provided a large, anonymized dataset for testing. The technical test analyst is tasked with designing a comprehensive set of technical tests, including performance, security, and reliability tests, to ensure the application's robustness before deployment. Considering the regulatory environment, which of the following approaches to technical test design and execution is most appropriate? Option A. Utilize the provided anonymized dataset for all technical tests, focusing primarily on functional correctness and performance metrics, assuming that anonymization inherently satisfies all regulatory data privacy requirements. Option B. Design tests that simulate realistic user workflows and system interactions, incorporating data masking and anonymization techniques for any production-derived data used, and explicitly include security vulnerability scans and compliance checks within the test plan. Option C. Prioritize the execution of performance and reliability tests using the anonymized dataset to ensure system scalability, deferring detailed security testing and compliance checks to a later phase or a separate audit. Option D. Leverage a subset of the production data, applying basic anonymization to create more realistic test scenarios for performance and security testing, believing that a degree of realism outweighs the marginal risk of residual data exposure. The correct answer is B. Design tests that simulate realistic user workflows and system interactions, incorporating data masking and anonymization techniques for any production-derived data used, and explicitly include security vulnerability scans and compliance checks within the test plan. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the technical test analyst to balance the need for thorough technical testing with the constraints of a rapidly evolving regulatory landscape, specifically concerning data privacy and security, as mandated by the UK's GDPR and the Financial Conduct Authority (FCA) regulations. The analyst must ensure that testing activities do not inadvertently expose sensitive customer data or violate compliance requirements, which could lead to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to select testing techniques that are both effective for identifying technical defects and compliant with these stringent regulations. The correct approach involves designing and executing tests that simulate realistic user interactions and system behaviors, while employing data masking and anonymization techniques. This ensures that test data, even if derived from production, cannot be traced back to individuals, thereby adhering to GDPR principles of data minimization and privacy by design. Furthermore, by focusing on security vulnerabilities and compliance checks as part of the technical test strategy, the analyst directly addresses FCA requirements for robust financial system integrity and customer protection. This proactive, compliance-aware approach is the most professionally sound and ethically responsible. An incorrect approach that relies solely on production data without adequate anonymization or masking fails to uphold the principles of data protection mandated by GDPR. This exposes the organization to a high risk of data breaches and noncompliance, leading to potential fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach that neglects security testing and compliance checks, focusing only on functional aspects, ignores critical FCA requirements for system resilience and customer data security. This leaves the system vulnerable to attacks and regulatory scrutiny. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of testing over data integrity and compliance risks creating a false sense of security, where defects might be missed or compliance issues overlooked, ultimately jeopardizing the product and the organization's standing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and regulatory adherence. This involves understanding the specific data privacy and security regulations applicable to the project's jurisdiction. In this case, UK GDPR and FCA guidelines, identifying potential testing-related risks to compliance, and selecting testing strategies and techniques that mitigate these risks. A continuous feedback loop with legal and compliance teams is also crucial to ensure that testing practices remain aligned with evolving regulatory requirements. Question 17. What factors determine the appropriate tailoring of test strategies, selection of test levels and types for a given project, ensuring alignment with organizational policies, project goals, and business objectives within the ISTQB Certified Tester Expert Level Technical Test Analyst Framework? Option A. The availability of testing tools and the personal preferences of the test team lead regarding specific testing techniques. Option B. The specific development methodology, e.g., Agile, Waterfall, project complexity, criticality, regulatory compliance requirements, and the organization's risk appetite and quality policies. Option C. The historical performance of previous test teams on similar projects without re-evaluating current project-specific risks. Option D. The desire to achieve a high percentage of test case coverage, regardless of the business impact of potential defects. The correct answer is B. The specific development methodology, e.g., Agile, Waterfall, project complexity, criticality, regulatory compliance requirements, and the organization's risk appetite and quality policies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because aligning test activities with overarching organizational policies, project goals, and business objectives is fundamental to demonstrating the value of testing and ensuring it contributes to successful product delivery. Misalignment can lead to wasted resources, missed critical defects, and ultimately, a failure to meet business needs. Tailoring test strategies to different project types, such as Agile versus Waterfall, requires a nuanced understanding of their respective life cycles and risk profiles. Selecting appropriate test levels and types necessitates a deep understanding of the product's architecture, potential risks, and the specific quality attributes that are most critical to the business. This requires not just technical testing expertise, but also strong communication and collaboration skills to ensure buy-in and understanding from stakeholders. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the organizational context, including its quality policies, risk appetite, and strategic business objectives. This assessment informs the development of a high-level test strategy that sets the overall direction for testing across the organization or a significant program. Subsequently, this strategy is tailored to specific projects by considering their unique characteristics, such as development methodology, agile, waterfall, complexity, criticality, and regulatory compliance requirements. The selection of appropriate test levels, e.g., component, integration, system, acceptance, and types, e.g., functional, performance, security, usability, is then driven by the identified risks and the defined quality goals for that specific project, ensuring that testing efforts are focused and effective. This systematic alignment ensures that testing is not an isolated activity, but an integral part of the product development lifecycle, directly supporting business success and adhering to any relevant industry standards or regulatory mandates applicable within the ISTQB framework scope. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes solely technical test execution without considering organizational policies or business objectives fails to demonstrate the strategic value of testing. This can lead to testing activities that are technically sound but do not address the most critical business risks or contribute to the achievement of strategic goals, potentially violating ethical responsibilities to deliver value. An approach that applies a single, rigid test strategy to all project types, regardless of their methodology or risk profile, is inefficient and ineffective. This ignores the need for tailoring, which is essential for optimizing test efforts, and can lead to compliance failures if specific project types have unique regulatory requirements that are not addressed by the generic strategy. An approach that selects test levels and types based on personal preference or familiarity, rather than a risk-based analysis tied to business objectives and project context, is unprofessional. This can result in inadequate testing of critical areas or excessive testing of low-risk features, misallocating resources and potentially leading to the release of products with unacceptable quality, which is a failure of professional duty. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a top-down, risk-based approach. First, understand the organizational quality policies, business objectives, and overall project goals. Second, develop a flexible test strategy that can be adapted to different project types and methodologies. Third, for each project, conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential failures and their impact on business objectives. Finally, select appropriate test levels and types that directly address these identified risks and contribute to achieving the defined quality goals, ensuring alignment with organizational strategy and regulatory compliance. Question 18. Market research demonstrates that financial institutions are increasingly adopting agile methodologies for developing trading platforms, but regulatory bodies continue to emphasize stringent auditability and data integrity requirements. A technical test analyst is tasked with designing and implementing a test automation framework for a new high-frequency trading system. The system handles complex order types, real-time market data feeds, and requires auditable logs of all test executions, including the specific data inputs and outcomes. The chosen framework must facilitate efficient test maintenance and allow for contributions from business analysts in defining test scenarios, which approach best balances these competing demands and ensures regulatory compliance. Option A. Choose an automation tool based primarily on its market share and ease of initial setup, without a detailed assessment of its specific capabilities for handling complex financial data and generating regulatory compliant audit trails. Option B. Select a keyword-driven framework, prioritizing the creation of highly readable test scripts that abstract away technical details, and assume that data variations can be managed through manual adjustments to test data files as needed. Option C. Design a hybrid framework that leverages keyword-driven principles for test logic and data-driven principles for test data management, ensuring the framework supports detailed logging of keyword execution and data inputs for auditability. Option D. Implement a purely data-driven framework, focusing on maximizing the number of test cases by varying input data extensively for a limited set of core functionalities. The correct answer is D. Implement a purely data-driven framework, focusing on maximizing the number of test cases by varying input data extensively for a limited set of core functionalities. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in technical test analysis. Selecting and implementing a test automation framework for a critical financial trading platform. Professional challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid development and deployment with the stringent regulatory requirements for accuracy, auditability, and security inherent in financial systems. The chosen framework must not only be technically sound and efficient, but also demonstrably compliant with relevant financial regulations, which often mandate specific testing methodologies, data integrity checks, and auditable test execution logs. Failure to select and implement an appropriate framework can lead to significant financial losses, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves selecting a hybrid framework that combines the strengths of data-driven and keyword-driven methodologies. This approach is professionally sound because it allows for the separation of test logic keywords from test data, and also enables business analysts or domain experts to contribute to test case design through keywords without deep technical knowledge. For a financial trading platform, this is crucial for ensuring comprehensive test coverage of various trading scenarios and data inputs. Critically, this hybrid approach facilitates the generation of detailed, auditable logs for each test execution, including the specific data used and the keywords executed. This directly addresses regulatory requirements common in financial services, such as those mandated by the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, in the UK, which emphasize the need for robust testing, clear audit trails, and demonstrable control over system behavior to ensure market integrity and protect consumers. The ability to easily modify test data without altering the core test scripts also supports the agile development cycles often found in financial technology, while maintaining regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a purely data-driven framework without considering keyword-driven elements would be professionally unsound. While it excels at testing variations of the same test case with different data, it can become cumbersome to manage complex business logic or introduce new test scenarios. This lack of flexibility can hinder the ability to adequately test the intricate rules and conditions of a trading platform, potentially leading to missed defects that could have regulatory implications. Furthermore, the auditability of complex business logic might be less transparent compared to a keyword-driven approach, making it harder to demonstrate compliance with regulatory expectations for thorough testing of business rules. Adopting a purely keyword-driven framework without a robust data management strategy would also be professionally unacceptable. While it offers good readability and maintainability for test logic, it can lead to a proliferation of redundant test scripts if not managed with a clear data separation strategy. For a financial trading platform, the sheer volume and variety of test data required to cover all market conditions and transaction types would make this approach inefficient and prone to errors. This inefficiency could compromise the thoroughness of testing, increasing the risk of deploying a system that fails to meet regulatory standards for accuracy and reliability. The lack of a structured data-driven component would also make it harder to generate the granular, data-specific audit logs required by financial regulators. Choosing an automation tool solely based on its popularity or perceived ease of use, without a thorough evaluation of its ability to support a hybrid framework and meet specific regulatory logging and auditability requirements, is a significant professional failure. This could result in a tool that cannot generate the necessary audit trails, handle the complex data structures of financial transactions, or integrate with other compliance-related systems. The regulatory implications of using an inadequate tool are severe, potentially leading to non-compliance with mandates for system integrity and data protection. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the selection and implementation of test automation frameworks by first understanding the specific regulatory landscape governing the system under test. This involves identifying requirements related to test coverage, data integrity, auditability, and security. Next, they should evaluate different framework types, data-driven, keyword-driven, hybrid, based on their ability to meet these regulatory demands, as well as technical considerations like maintainability, scalability, and reusability. The chosen framework should then be mapped to appropriate automation tools and technologies that explicitly support the required functionalities, particularly robust logging and reporting capabilities. A pilot implementation or proof of concept is advisable to validate the chosen approach and toolset against critical regulatory scenarios before full-scale deployment. This systematic, risk-based approach ensures that the automation strategy not only enhances testing efficiency, but also demonstrably supports regulatory compliance. Question 19. The audit findings indicate a consistent pattern of missed defects in the integration testing phase, leading to downstream issues. As a technical test analyst tasked with improving the test process, which of the following approaches would best address this situation and contribute to increased testing maturity? Option A. Rely on the subjective feedback from the test team regarding their perceived challenges in the integration phase to make ad hoc adjustments to the test plan. Option B. Immediately introduce a new, more complex test management tool that promises advanced defect tracking capabilities, assuming it will inherently resolve the missed defect issue. Option C. Implement a structured approach to identify root causes of missed defects. Define key metrics to track defect detection rates and escape rates, and leverage a process model like TMMI to guide the enhancement of integration testing practices and overall testing maturity. Option D. Focus on increasing the number of test cases executed in the integration phase, believing that more testing activity will naturally catch more defects. The correct answer is C. Implement a structured approach to identify root causes of missed defects, define key metrics to track defect detection rates and escape rates, and leverage a process model like TMMI to guide the enhancement of integration testing practices and overall testing maturity. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the technical test analyst to balance the immediate need for process improvement with the long-term strategic goal of increasing testing maturity, all while adhering to the principles of the ISTQB Certified Tester Expert Level Technical Test Analyst syllabus. The challenge lies in selecting an approach that is not only effective in addressing current audit findings, but also contributes to a sustainable and measurable improvement in the overall test process, aligning with established process models. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven method for identifying and implementing process improvements, leveraging metrics to assess effectiveness, and applying process models to guide maturity enhancement. This aligns with the ISTQB syllabus's emphasis on using metrics for informed decision-making and the application of process improvement frameworks like TMMI or CMMI to achieve higher levels of testing maturity. The regulatory and ethical justification stems from the professional responsibility to deliver high-quality software through efficient and effective testing processes. By focusing on measurable improvements and structured maturity models, the analyst upholds professional standards of competence and due diligence, ensuring that testing efforts are not only reactive to audit findings, but also proactive in preventing future issues and enhancing overall product quality. An approach that focuses solely on immediate fixes without a plan for measuring impact or integrating with a maturity model fails to address the root causes of the audit findings and misses an opportunity to elevate the testing process. This can lead to recurring issues and a lack of demonstrable progress in testing maturity, potentially violating the ethical obligation to continuously improve professional practice. An approach that prioritizes implementing a complex process model without first understanding the current state and identifying specific areas for improvement is inefficient and may lead to resistance or misapplication of the model. This can result in wasted resources and a failure to achieve the desired outcomes, demonstrating a lack of professional judgment in resource allocation and strategic planning. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or subjective opinions rather than objective metrics to drive improvements is unprofessional and unreliable. This can lead to misguided efforts, a failure to identify true bottlenecks, and an inability to demonstrate the effectiveness of implemented changes, thereby not meeting the professional standard of evidence-based decision-making. The professional decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific audit findings and their underlying causes. 2. Evaluating the current state of the test process against established benchmarks or maturity models. 3. Identifying key metrics that can objectively measure the effectiveness of proposed improvements. 4. Selecting and applying appropriate process improvement methodologies and models that align with organizational goals and testing maturity objectives. 5. Implementing changes in a phased and controlled manner, continuously monitoring metrics to assess impact and make necessary adjustments. 6. Communicating progress and results to stakeholders to ensure buy-in and demonstrate value. Question 20. Governance review demonstrates that the current performance testing strategy for the new e-commerce platform lacks clear alignment with business objectives and regulatory compliance requirements. As the technical test analyst, which approach best addresses these findings to ensure effective performance testing? Option A. Define performance objectives based on industry benchmarks and select a comprehensive suite of performance testing tools to cover all potential scenarios, irrespective of immediate business priorities or budget constraints. Option B. Engage with business stakeholders to understand critical user journeys, transaction volumes, and regulatory requirements for system availability and response times. Then select appropriate tools and techniques to validate these specific objectives. Option C. Focus on simulating peak load conditions based on historical data from similar projects, without detailed consultation with current stakeholders, to ensure the system can handle anticipated traffic. Option D. Prioritize the use of the most advanced performance testing tool available to identify the absolute maximum transaction processing capacity of the system, assuming this will satisfy all stakeholder needs. The correct answer is A. Define performance objectives based on industry benchmarks and select a comprehensive suite of performance testing tools to cover all potential scenarios, irrespective of immediate business priorities or budget constraints. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the technical test analyst to balance the technical demands of performance testing with the broader business objectives and stakeholder expectations. The challenge lies in translating abstract performance goals into concrete, measurable test objectives and selecting tools and techniques that are both technically sound and cost-effective, while also ensuring compliance with any relevant regulatory frameworks that might govern system availability or data integrity. Misinterpreting or misaligning these objectives can lead to wasted resources, ineffective testing, and ultimately, a system that fails to meet user needs or regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the system's intended use, critical business processes, and potential user load, as articulated by stakeholders. This understanding forms the basis for defining specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART performance objectives. For instance, if the system supports financial transaction, regulatory requirements for uptime and transaction processing speed would be paramount. The selection of performance testing tools and techniques should then be driven by these objectives, considering factors like the type of load to simulate, e.g., concurrent users, transaction volume, the system architecture, and the cost-benefit analysis of different tools. This approach ensures that performance testing is aligned with business value and regulatory compliance, providing actionable insights to improve system resilience and performance. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on achieving the highest possible throughput without considering the business context or user experience is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address the actual needs of the stakeholders and may lead to over-engineering or misallocation of resources. It also risks overlooking critical performance bottlenecks that impact user satisfaction or regulatory compliance, even if raw throughput is high. An approach that prioritizes the use of a specific, familiar performance testing tool without first defining clear objectives or understanding the system's requirements is also professionally flawed. This can lead to the tool being ill-suited for the task, generating irrelevant data, or failing to uncover critical performance issues. It demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a failure to apply the tool effectively to meet business needs. An approach that neglects to consider the cost implications of performance testing tools and infrastructure, opting for the most expensive or feature-rich options without justification, is professionally unsound. This can lead to budget overruns and demonstrate a lack of fiscal responsibility, especially when simpler, more cost-effective solutions could achieve the same objectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a stakeholder-centric and objective-driven approach. This involves actively engaging with business stakeholders to understand their expectations and the critical success factors for the system. The process should begin with defining clear, measurable performance objectives that are directly linked to business goals and any applicable regulatory mandates. Subsequently, The selection of tools and techniques should be a deliberate process, evaluating various options against these defined objectives, considering technical feasibility, cost-effectiveness, and the ability to generate meaningful and actionable results. Regular communication and validation with stakeholders throughout the testing lifecycle are crucial to ensure continued alignment and to manage expectations effectively.